Welcome! So today we're going to tackle a concept that sounds super technical, but is actually one of the most powerful ways to understand, well, pretty much anything, from baking a cake to running a giant company. We're talking about input-output analysis, and we're going to turn it from this abstract idea into a really practical guide for seeing your work with total clarity.
Let me just start with a question. You ever feel like you're just pouring all this time, energy, and resources into a project, and the final result just feels kind of random? Like, you know you're working hard, but you're not exactly sure how all that effort actually turns into the thing you get at the end. It really feels like you're dealing with a black box.
And yeah, black box is the perfect term for it. In this world, it's basically any process where you can see what goes in and you can see what comes out, but the how, the actual transformation that happens inside is a complete mystery. So input-output analysis, that's the toolkit we're going to use to systematically pry that box open.
All right, so how do we open it? Well, to really understand any process, we first have to look inside that box and figure out what its core engine looks like. And you know what? You'll find it's surprisingly simple. It's really just made up of three fundamental parts.
Okay, so it all starts with the input. These are the basic resources you put into the process. It's the what you start with. So imagine a local bakery making a custom wedding cake. The inputs aren't just the obvious things like flour and sugar. Nope, it's also the detailed customer order, the electricity for the ovens, and of course, the baker's skilled time and labor. All of that is input.
So once you have your inputs, next up is the engine itself, the process. This is the sequence of actions that actually converts or transforms those inputs. For our bakery, this is the magic, right? It's the mixing, the baking, the cooling, and then all that intricate decorating based on what the customer wanted. This is the how. This is where the real work gets done.
And all that transformation leads us, finally, to the output. This is the finished thing, the product or service you get at the very end. For our baker, it's that beautiful three-tiered wedding cake, all boxed up and ready to go. The output is the tangible, measurable result of that whole sequence.
And that's the core flow right there. Inputs get transformed by a process to create outputs. This simple, super powerful sequence is the absolute foundation for looking at any task, any workflow, any system. And once you really get this pattern down, I'm telling you, you'll start seeing it absolutely everywhere.
But, just knowing the parts of the engine isn't enough, right? I mean, you also need a dashboard with gauges so you can tell how well it's actually running. So that's our next step. We're going to figure out how to actually measure the performance of our system.
You've probably heard the old saying, you can't improve what you don't measure. And it's so true. It all starts with data. These are the raw facts, like we used 5 pounds of flour, or decorating took 6 hours. But data by itself isn't all that useful. We need to turn that data into metrics. These are the meaningful indicators, things like ingredient cost per cake or average production time, that actually tell us how we're performing.
Now let's look at two of the most critical gauges you can have on your dashboard: efficiency and yield. Efficiency basically asks, are we using our stuff well? Think of it like miles per gallon in a car. For our baker, it might be how many cakes they can decorate in an hour. But then there's yield. Yield asks a different question. Are we producing a good result? See, you can be super efficient at decorating cakes with the wrong names spelled on them. Yield tells you what percentage of your cakes are actually perfect and get a thumbs up from the customer. Big difference.
Okay, so we've got our engine, we're reading the gauges on the dashboard. Now it's time to actually grab the steering wheel. This is the part where we go from just passively understanding what's going on to actively improving it using feedback.
You can't steer if you don't have a destination, right? It's that simple. That's why the absolute first step here is setting clear goals. What's the bakery's goal? Is it to pump out any cake in under 4 hours? Or is it to hit a 99% customer satisfaction rating? Goals define what good even looks like, and they give us the target that all our metrics are measured against.
And this brings us to the engine of improvement itself, the feedback loop. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful cycle. Step 1, you set a goal. Let's say reduce production time. Step 2, you measure your output. Okay, right now it's 4 hours per cake. Step 3, you compare that output to your goal of 3 hours. And then, step 4, based on that difference, you adjust the process. Maybe you start prepping ingredients differently. This 4-step loop is what allows you to constantly, dynamically get better.
So far, we've been really focused on one single black box. But here's the thing.
No process exists in a vacuum. To really, truly master your work, you have to zoom out and see how your specific little engine fits into the whole factory, the entire system.
And this is really the ultimate point of thinking this way. Input-output analysis isn't just about making one small task a little bit better. It's a whole philosophy for turning a bunch of scattered activities into a single, coherent system where everything is connected, everything is measured, and everything is designed to create real value.
So, taking this system-level view, it forces us to ask much bigger questions. We start to see the bakery's cake-making process as just one part of a bigger machine. We focus on quality, like does the finished cake actually meet the standards of the delivery service that has to transport it? And maybe most importantly, we look at value. Does the final price of that cake truly justify the cost of all the expensive ingredients and skilled labor we poured into it?
So let's just recap this whole journey real quick. We started with a total mystery, right? A black box. But by applying these simple principles, input, process, and output, and by using data, goals, and feedback, we've managed to turn that mystery into a clear, measurable, and optimizable system. And that right there is the path from mystery to mastery.
And that brings us to the final and honestly the most important question. Think about your own work, your projects, maybe even your daily routines. What process feels kind of murky or unpredictable? What black box in your world is just sitting there ready to be opened, understood, and mastered? That's where your journey begins.